Here's the two scud patterns that you need to have in your box. Here's a big chunky scud pattern. That's Arizona semi-seal with some olive tail, and I think the fish are really going to enjoy going after that one. Scuds are one of those patterns that you can use a lot of different materials to tie them with, and they're kind of fun to mess around with. You can see here I've tied this one in some dyed UV polar chenille, which looks kind of like that. And then this one over here does not have a tail, where these other two have some marabou, and they have the UV crystal flash in them with this Fish Hunter Marabou Dark Olive. So these ones in particular were tied with the ice stub olive brown, but I'm going to tie some in the Arizona crawdad. And there's the hook I've been using. And let me show you the thread. So just an olive ultra thread, and then that's what I'm using to rib it with. And I'm just wrapping the hook shank with some lead about halfway across these. And then this is just sandwich bag material that I'm using for the backing. Okay, so we've dressed the hook, and now I've got this burnt orange. We're going to do a burnt orange tail on this little scud here. I think that might be a, well, my hope would be it'd be a trigger color. I don't know if the fish will actually hit it, but I think it's worth trying to see what it will look like. Gotta always experiment with the flies and see what we can make. Got some crystal flash that I've just doubled over on itself. We're going to use this little loop for antennas towards the end of the fly. Make sure and leave enough room up in this area that we can that we'll be able to basically have enough to whip finish, pull the plastic in, the wire ribbing, so you need a lot of room up here by the eye of the hook. So I've got the tail here, and I've kind of pre-cut the fork in it. So we'll go ahead and wrap this back covering of the fly on, and I like to kind of bring it down around the bottom of the hook shank just a little bit. That way we can peel this back, and it'll give the fly a little bit of like scud curvature. And then on this one, I'm going to tie the wire in just a little bit earlier than I did on some of the previous ones. That's one of the things that's kind of interesting about a scud, is you can get away with so much. It's really about what the end result looks like. I do like to kind of get that first wrap started no matter what I'm doing though, just so I can get the curvature going. I think it's a little bit hard, and it pulls the plastic funny if you don't at least get one of those curves started. So, okay. We're going to dub this with the crawdad. It's the Arizona semi-seal. Just rotate that up to the top and just really pinch it onto this thread. This thread feels kind of waxy, so I don't have any wax on this stuff. It's still a little bit dry, but I think you can kind of get away with it. It just kind of works. So once you kind of have it to that point, you just want to start wrapping this thing. You're going to kind of build this body. Should be a little bit chunkier in the middle, and then taper down to the front. Okay, and you can come back around the back, and if you feel like it's getting too fat, you can always pull a little bit of it off, and you can bring it back down with your thread. And then we'll just come up here and put a couple of loops on there. And I don't care if that little chunky bit ends up in there. We're going to pull our plastic over. I'm going to give that a couple of wraps here. I think the first wrap is probably the most important for that reason right there. Maybe the best way is probably to hold the hold our antennas out over here with the plastic when we do our first wrap around that front edge. And yeah, I think that's a little bit better method there. And then we'll come up here, and we're gonna wrap that around so we get both sides of the plastic. Okay, so you can see that kind of tied off the plastic here. I just did a little whip finish. So we're going to go ahead and cut that out of the way. And then we'll do our wraps here. We're going to take this wire and just start putting our ribbing into this scud here. See what we can get. I don't really know what this is going to look like. I haven't been tying them with the burnt tail. But I know on my leech patterns, the fish have been loving it here in Utah. They love that burnt tail on the leeches, and I don't know why. So maybe they'll take it on the scuds as well. Kind of shorten that up a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to whip finish that, and then we'll get this brushed out. Get a couple more of these on here too. I don't think you can ever have enough whip finishes, honestly. I guess you could get too many, but and we'll pull that down tight. Okay, so kind of the final step here is to cut that wire off, and then we're going to build our antennas, so we'll cut those out, and you kind of have to decide how long you want your antennas to be. I like them about that long. And then we'll go ahead and brush out this, brush out these legs here. And if they come out too long, we can always trim them back with some scissors. I'm gonna go ahead and give that a little cut. Cut that a little bit. Let's see what we got. I think the legs are a little bit long, so we'll come back and trim them up just a little bit more. And we'll get some close-ups on that here in just a sec. Okay, there's kind of the finished result. I've kind of brushed that, brushed the legs out and trimmed it up a little bit more. But let me grab the olive dubbing one for comparison. And here's the one with the olive dub. So there's a slight difference between the two. I think this one looks a little bit more natural. Here's the two scud patterns side by side just for some comparison. And this one almost came out looking a little bit more like a crawdad with that burnt tail. Anyways, I hope you got something out of watching these, and have a good one. Alright, I'm going to just start out with dressing this hook up a little bit. Then I want to pick out just a few strands of this marabou. I guess when I say a few, about that many right there, if you can see that. And then we're just going to kind of twist that and then tie it in. And then we'll cut off that excess fluffy. If you can't get it because it fluffs all over on you, you can also just thread wrap it onto the part, and you can break it off like that too. I'm going to use this crystal flash now. I've just got a corner cut out, and I pull a little piece out of there, and we'll get that attached. I like to use this stuff. You can see how well it shows up against a dark background, and it'll pick up some shine. But this is what I like to use for the little, I don't know if they're called biots or tail pieces, I don't know what they're really called. But then also, like, I'll tie it on and leave it in a loop like this, so that we can use this part for basically antennas. So I've got it sitting here on the hook shank, and it's sitting just slightly longer than the marabou, and we'll just tie it in like that. And that's all you have to do with this for now. Probably should make sure that it's at least tied in close to the front end of the hook. The one thing you want to be careful of is we need a lot of space right here when we're bringing the dubbing up, so leave yourself enough room to whip finish on the front of this fly. The next thing you want to do is take your sandwich bag material, and it should be somewhere between, I don't know, about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 inch, somewhere in there. And we're just going to put it on here and tie it in, and we'll cut a bunch of this off later. So I'm going to hang this out just I don't know, maybe only a third the length of the marabou, not very long. And that's what we'll end up using for kind of like a tail covering. And it'll give the fly just a little bit different look. It'll look something kind of like this. So you can get like a little bit of a flash in there, and you can cut it into all kinds of different shapes or pull on it, but that's kind of the idea. You can see there's a little fork and it's been cut into little points in there. We're going to tie this with some of that crawdad color. Had this stuff for a long time. I guess it just doesn't ever really go bad. But all we're really doing is just twisting it onto the string. And then you can always add more or take some back later on as needed. Just one of those things that, yeah, I don't know, it's kind of like salt in your food. It's personal preference there. But a lot of it is determined on how well the fly looks too. So I'll just start wrapping it on here. And you'll notice that if you saw previously, a lot of the tail is down here around just after the curve, right? So I'm trying to keep this a lot fatter up here in the middle. And there's a reason for that. We want to be able to hold all that dubbing together and just kind of add a little bit of thickness to the fly and shape it a little bit. And then we're going to put our wire on here, and we'll put a little bit more of this dubbing on. So cut me a small little piece of that wire, and we're just going to kind of tuck it under some of that dubbing there and give it a few wraps here, right between the sandwich bag where it's hooked on and the material. And I like to kind of do some pre-wrapping with it. Kind of helps form it just a little bit, so I kind of get an idea when I go to put it on the plastic. And then I'll just wind that off, and it'll leave a little bit of form in that wire. You kind of have to be careful with it, but it should help you out quite a bit. Next, we're going to take this plastic and pull it right over the top, and then we'll just start rewrapping that on there. Try to keep that plastic up and over the kind of centered over the top, or it can actually kind of wrap around to just one side. Now I'm sure there's probably a rule of how many segments you're supposed to do, and I don't know what that rule is. I just kind of go till the fly looks natural, and that's probably one too many turns there, but I like that curve in the wire. And so we're going to bring this we'll bring this thread up here and fold this plastic back. Make sure we're tying in the plastic and the wire together. Make sure I got that wire in there on both sides of it. And then this wire is so thick I actually have a hard time with the helicopter method. So if it won't break, I may have to get out the scissors and cut it. You see it's a pretty thick wire, so I'll have to cut it. Alright, so I'm just going to come in, give that plastic a little cut. Likes to kind of stick to you. And we'll cut that wire off. And then for my antennas, I kind of usually save them for the very last thing, but it's always tempting to want to cut them. So we'll kind of show that because it might be a little easier to whip finish. I usually cut this, just kind of gauge how long I want them to be and kind of space them. Maybe pull them back and up. You kind of can decide how buggy you want it to be, and you can always leave them long, right? Because you can cut them back with clippers at any time. I'll just kind of leave them like that for right now, and then we'll just go ahead and whip finish that. You got to kind of be careful so that you don't drag your antennas back in there. We'll pull that tight. I like to do multiple whip finishes because I'm not real big into glue, but I will use glue on some stuff if I don't think I can get it threaded down. But nothing like knowing that the thread's been pulled tight to the point where you could almost break it and then have it not break, and that kind of gives me some confidence in my fly. And kind of the final step is to trim that little tail, and I don't think you'll be able to see that on the camera, so I'll just kind of do it back here, and I'll just cut it at an angle in one direction, and then I'll cut it up the middle of it, kind of the long ways. And then from there you can kind of just shape it to, you know, your desire. You just have to be careful that you're not taking out the marabou. So then kind of the final thing is to brush some of that, some of those legs out. Just pull them out. I just have this, I don't even know where I got this brush, but it came from somewhere. And if you pull it out too long, you can always trim a little bit off. Maybe you don't want it, you know, being too crazy, but that should give you a nice little juicy morsel. Should draw some attention.